Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. Lots going on today. Boy, it's breaking all over. I'm going to start on a personal rant on something that's broken, though. The bloody dryer broke at my house. And I'm going to use that as an excuse for my unkempt appearance today. It threw my morning into a loop. You don't see it, but I'm wearing skinny jeans that I probably should have thrown out years ago. And in my scrambling this morning, I didn't bother shaving. Not that I do it that often. But I had a real polite email from somebody a little while ago that was still horrified and couldn't handle it, said it was too distracting on when I do shows, when I'm unshaven and unkempt like that. The stubble gets on their nerves. Kind of bizarre. Sorry if it bothers you. But, you can always just listen to, we have the audio download as well, and you don't have to see that half-graying beard coming out of my face. I got Franco. Also Jane's going out appliance shopping today. So speaking of budgets, pray for ours, and let's hope she remains responsible within it. I'm sure she will be more so than our federal leaders out in Ottawa. Franco Terzano from the Taxpayers Federation is going to talk to us about that in a little while and break it down. And man, it's a bad one. All right, let's talk about the part we can save in Canada, and that's Alberta. And it's clear that the question of provincial independence, it has to come to a referendum in Alberta. There's no getting around it anymore. We got pro-independence groups who've been working for years in preparation for a referendum, and now anti-independence activists under disgraced former Redford government MLA Thomas Luksaszuk have turned in an official petition with over 400,000 signatures demanding a referendum on independence. Well, how can we say no? With people on both sides of the issue calling for a referendum, it only makes sense to schedule one for 2026. Now, Luksaszuk, also known as Fabio, is claiming now that he really didn't want to invoke a referendum with his petition. So either he's lying or he didn't actually read the application that he himself submitted to begin the petitioning. It expressly calls for a referendum on Alberta's status within Canada. It almost seems as if his actions were actually a data mining exercise for a political move down the road. Who knows? Whatever the motivation might be, though, the referendum ball is rolling. While Luksaszuk's petition calls for a referendum, it comes from the perspective of asking people to vote for the status quo. It's not a constitutional application, so no matter which way people vote in his referendum, as he phrases it, actually nothing will change. If a referendum is held where nothing could possibly change, no matter how people vote, it isn't a referendum. It's a tax-funded opinion poll. The Alberta government, though, they can remain true to the demands of the referendum proponents by changing the wording of the referendum, so it becomes a true one, a constitutional one that would lead to potentially the independence of Alberta under the Clarity Act. It's not tossing out Luksaszuk's efforts, it's giving him what he ostensibly wanted, but just in a different framing and where a positive vote would lead to independence. Scheduling a referendum would serve the UCP government well, too. The deadline's fast approaching for the demands Premier Smith made of the Carney government, and so far he's completely ignored them. There's few indications he's going to make any significant policy changes before her deadline in the Grey Cup. He said he'd kill the emissions cap, but then he added a bunch of caveats to the policy. If Smith lets Carney laugh in her face after these demands, her government's going to be rendered impotent when it comes to federal incursions and the blockage of Alberta's industries. If she scheduled an independence referendum the day after Grey Cup, though, I think people across the country would sit up and take notice. Support for independence in Alberta might not have hit majority level yet across the province, but the independence faction within the UCP is significant. Those independence advocates are getting impatient, and they're going to turn their guns towards the UCP if they don't see some action when it comes to dealing with a federation that treats Alberta poorly. The UCP AGM is approaching in just a few more weeks, and there are movements afoot to try and turn the UCP into an overtly sovereigntist party. This would be disastrous for the UCP. The best way Smith can take the pressure off from within her own party is to set an independence referendum date for mid-2026. Independence advocates can then turn their focus and energy into campaigning for the referendum, and the premier can just say she's letting democracy run its course, which it would be. It'd be a tough path to win an independence referendum with a clear majority wanting Alberta to leave the Federation. The momentum of public opinion, it is on the side of independence advocates, but there's a ways to go. Depending on the actions of the federal government and how effective the independence campaign is, the tide could turn. But even if only 40% of Albertans chose independence in a referendum next year, it wouldn't be a wasted effort. The country would be put on notice. Alberta is moving towards the tipping point of a successful independence vote, and if changes aren't made, a winning referendum is going to be held within a few years. A referendum campaign will put the Federation and Alberta's role within it into the news scroll for at least 6 months. Discussions of provincial jurisdiction and federal policies that harm the province are going to dominate punditry, and people could begin to understand that the status quo isn't an option. There's little sense forcing groups to petition further to invoke a referendum on Alberta's independence. Luksaszuk got the job done. Thank you, Thomas. Now let's put it in the hands of the electorate, but with better phrasing and a binding outcome. Let 2026 be the year of the referendum. That's what I got to start. How's it going, Dave?
Not bad. Your stubble is worse than my stubble
Today,
today.
I haven't always out stubbled you.
No, I hate shaving.
Yeah, I know it's pain in the
I
ass.
do it once a week, Sunday, and then I'm good for the week. It doesn't grow that quickly. I don't have like a 5 o'clock shadow or anything.
Yeah, well, it's been a few days since I got around to this. I'm just making an excuse, I guess. If I really wanted to get around to it, I could.
Are dryers expensive?
Probably. I'm gonna
And
find out.
Jane's going for the top of the line.
Well, she talks like Carney with the budget. It's not a cost; it's an investment.
All right, so you get clean clothes.
Dry clothes, anyway.
You and Derek are fighting, eh?
What are we fighting about this time?
Who's going to be the first to be arrested under the new
Oh, yes.
residential school denialism law?
True enough. I mean, we could both be charged, but I think it would look better if it's just one of us. There can only be one.
Yeah, and you've already been charged by one Indian
the
band.
Siksika band, yeah.
Siksika stuff.
That's still crawling its way through the courts. I think in a couple of weeks it goes back again, and then they're going to schedule a trial date into sometime next year.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
I got lots to look forward to.
Way to waste the court's time. So let's take a quick break from all the numbers and the budget stuff. And our lead story right now is coming out of New York, where there was a Mississauga man who a couple of years ago wanted to blow up Times Square on behalf of ISIS. He got sentenced to 40 years in the slammer, and he's back in the news today because he found an edged weapon and stabbed 2 prison guards, one in the eye, and he lost his eye. So he pled guilty to that today, and a note was found in his sock that this was an ISIS-inspired attack. So even from within jails now, they're able to launch these attacks. So, okay, back to the budget. Carney is out selling it this morning, how wonderful it is, and everything is good in the world of the world. Tories are dealing with a traitor in their midst, Chris D'Entremont. Not sure how to pronounce it.
D'Entremont. I don't know. I was kind of happy if there's going to be floor crossers. Let's get rid of the ones I can't pronounce well. Anyway.
Exactly. He represents Halifax, and the Conservatives have lost their mind. They're being very nasty to him. But as we were talking about earlier, when it's the other way, when the shoe's on the other foot, the Conservatives are more than happy to welcome.
And it has gone both ways, and it pisses people off on both sides. So
you got to, when you're yelling at somebody today, remember the double standard, because you're gonna do it the same thing. Other budget news: the $2 billion tree planting plan from Miss McKenna and Mr. Trudeau has been officially canceled. They only spent $250 million of it on it. So they saved about I think $5.5 billion from what the initial cost was going to be. In the budget documents, they were also talking about reducing temporary student admissions by 43%. A step in the right direction, I think. So we'll give them kudos for that. And the good news for you, they're dropping the luxury tax.
Oh.
So you can now, after Jane has bought the dryer,
yes,
you can go out and buy a yacht.
Well, that's great. I mean, with my gold-plated Western Senator's salary, I mean, I'll have to split between that and my Lamborghini. But...
Absolutely. And your private jet to fly down to your fifth wheel in the Arizona desert.
That's right.
So that's what we got now. Just breaking as I walked in, 98% of Alberta nurses in the Alberta Union of Public Employees. These are mainly like LPNs and stuff like that, 16,000 of them. 98% in favor of going on strike. So we just got the teachers all settled, and now it looks like the nurses are coming.
Well, that's why we need that right to work legislation that I've been thumping on, in my view, anyways. So you sent our young intrepid reporter Leah out onto the wild streets of Calgary.
The police chief, Katie McClellan, came out today and said enough is enough. She says downtown crime is rising. It's not just a perception; it's a reality. So they sent out dozens of cops and horsebacks and cops on horseback and all sorts of stuff to just do a little sweep through the downtown core and see what's going on, pick up the ne'er-do-wells. And our Leah Mushet was along for the ride. She's got video and photos, and we'll be getting that up this afternoon.
Right on. Well, it's good to get them out for some fresh air. I mean, we're not.
It is. Get them out on the streets where they belong.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks. I'll let you back to your desk to cover all this mess going on today, and we'll talk after the show.
Thank you, sir.
Right on. Thanks. That is our news editor, Dave Naylor. For you guys who didn't already know, And yes, he's out shaving me this week. The reason Dave is managing so many reporters and so many stories is because you guys have subscribed to this. Where I like to remind you, get on there, guys. westernstandard.news/membership, $10 a month, $100 for a year. It keeps us independent, keeps us accountable to you. Speaking of accountable, we want to talk about floor crossings and things like that. Well, you don't like what we're doing, just cancel your, and I'm not suggesting you do. Cancel your subscription, though, if you really, really feel we're beyond the pale. That's something I get, feedback from people. I don't like this columnist, or I don't like that reporter. I don't like. Okay, that's fine. Keep in mind, there's a bunch of us here. You don't have to like all of us. It's easy just to click on the ones you prefer over others. I just, we get some of those emails now and then. When I've said something to annoy people, I know it's so rare when that happens, but we get the email saying, that's it, get rid of Morgan, or I'm canceling my subscription. Unfortunately, it led to a cancellation of a subscription. But being serious, folks, I really appreciate those of you who have subscribed and who are tuning in. It really is important to us to keep funding independent media so we can stay independent media and cover all these things. So let's see some of these things. Talking about that independence vote, somebody saying, why not have it in January? Well, if it's going to happen, it's got to take a little more time. Again, I think some people are a little too optimistic about the chances of an independence vote actually winning in Alberta at this point. If it's going to happen, it's going to be a big deal. It's got to be done right, and it's going to take some months. So if it's going to be scheduled, it should be scheduled well into 2026. That said, I can't think of a better time to call for scheduling it and opening that discussion than the day after Grey Cup. I mean, what is Premier Smith going to say? She laid out some very solid demands with a big open-ended or else at the end of it. And Carney has ignored every one of those demands. So, well, I think, throw it to the people. What an opportune time to do it. We don't have a team in the Grey Cup this year anyways. I don't know, maybe Edmonton still can. I don't follow CFL all that closely. All right. But yeah, talking about, and I see somebody else saying Matt Genereux might be crossing the floor from the Conservatives as well. So some people are getting all wound up on me, at me on X. That's nothing new. But I'm talking about floor crossings. Look, guys, it's part of the system. It's part of the system. If you want to look at your political history enough, Churchill managed to pull it off both ways. Most floor crossers flare out. I mean, they have ticked off their supporters. They have annoyed the people who elected them to be with a particular party, and they get wiped out in the next election, or they don't even run because they know they're going to be wiped out in the next election. When Premier Smith did her ill-fated floor crossing in 2014 in Alberta, and I was on the provincial executive with the Wilders, rest assured I was as furious as anybody could be over that. There were 11 Wilders MLAs crossed. There was Danielle and 8 of them when she did it, but there were actually 2 others that crossed prior to that to the PCs. Not a single one of them had their seat within a year of that. Think about that. They all got annihilated. It was either losing local nominations or losing in the general election or heading for the hills because they realized it. But then on the other side of the coin, we got some Conservatives. People talk about BC. How did the BC Conservative Party get its roots? How did it get started? Well, actually, it was because floor crossers came from the BC United Party who were tired of Kevin Falcon and crossed to the Conservatives to give them a base to begin with and start. Well, Conservatives, a lot of them celebrated that. I'm just saying we got to drop a bit of the double standard. The system's imperfect, absolutely. And I can understand why people are furious. They supported a Conservative Party member, and that party member less than a year later crossed. But let's just stick to one standard, folks. It's enough. If you want to change the entire system, well, we'll talk more about that independence thing I'm talking about. Or at the very least, get some recall legislation federally if you really wanted to see that. So if the floor crosser really did infuriate their base that much, give the electors a chance to initiate and trigger a by-election to change it. But otherwise, remember, party leaders are already powerful enough. This is one of the things that can kind of hold them in check. You don't like whipped votes. You don't like them all voting exactly the same way or never speaking for themselves. Well, if you take away the ability to cross the floor, I tell you what, you might as well just get rid of local representation and just elect leaders, because they will have no ability to deviate from the party line in any way ever again. And that's not healthy for democracy, folks. Even if you're furious with what that Chris unpronounceable French guy did the other day. All right, I'm not going to bother learning his name because I don't expect to speak too much more about him. Franco Terzano, I remember he corrected me because I shorted him on Zeds in his name before. He can be a little pedantic when it comes to that, but I understand it. He's with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. As I said to Dave, this is his Super Bowl. This is budget time, and boy, has he ever got a lot to talk about on that. So let's bring him on and break some of that down. How's it going, Franco?
Hey, Cory, great to be on the show with you, man.
Oh, always great to have you on. And I mean, perfect timing, of course, after the budget. Well, where do we begin? Is it pretty much what you expected?
Oh, it's worse. It's worse. I mean, look, it's a debt disaster, right? The debt is spiraling out of control because spending is spiraling out of control. And I mean, Cory, like, welcome to Canada, man. Every single dollar you're paying in federal sales tax is now going to pay interest charges on the debt. And look, Ottawa, we have a problem. Or more precisely, there's two problems. Number one is the debt, massive debt crunch that we're in. But you know what might be even a bigger problem is that it seems like nobody within the Liberal governing party is taking the first problem serious. It's almost like nobody is acting with any sense of urgency here. Meanwhile, the fire is starting to spread and they got to put it out before it gets real, real bad.
Well, yeah. And I mean, part of, the Liberals of the 90s are long gone when they balanced the budget. It's something that kind of allowing the current ones to skate is low interest rates. In the 90s, people could kind of see how badly this is costing them. What I like about you guys, though, is you break things down and you put it into terms we can understand. Like, I believe the deficit alone adds up to almost $2,000 for every man, woman, and child in the country. If you had a household of four, I think it's about $7,600 you're taking on as debt just this year. I mean, this is big.
Well, look at the debt interest charges. I mentioned now that every dollar in federal sales tax is just going to pay interest on the debt. Let's break it down one other way. Interest charges are costing each Canadian more than $1,000 this year, right? That's $1,000 that the government is taking from each Canadian, not to build a hospital, not to improve education. No, not even to pay down the debt, right? The government is taking $1,000 from each Canadian just to pay interest on the debt.
Yeah, and I mean, interest is just money flush. So, he's tried to play both sides of the fence. He said, "Oh, this is investment. It's not spending. Oh, and we made some cuts, so this is actually an austerity budget." I don't know how you can expand spending that much and use the word austerity without throwing up a little or something. But what should be cut?
Well, look, we need austerity for the government, right? You heard Carney go on about sacrifice. How about politicians and government bureaucrats sacrifice for a change? And like austerity, huh? Are you kidding me? The Carney government is spending $581 billion this year. Cory, does that sound like austerity to you? $581 billion in spending? Everyone knows that Trudeau was reckless, that he wasted money like crazy, that we had a decade of out of control spending. Well, Carney this year is going to spend $38 billion more than the government did last year. Like, does that sound like austerity to you, Cory? And I'll get to like where we got to cut in a second, but let me just point out one more thing, because you're right. Carney is trying to play it both ways here, right? In his budget, he said, "Oh, don't worry, folks. We're going to find a bunch of savings." Well, you got to check the fine print. Guess when all those savings magically are going to occur? In future years, right? It's like the government is always saying it's going to go on a diet Monday, and then Monday never comes. The same thing happened during the Trudeau era. Oh, we'll run some deficits, balance the budget in 4 years. That never happened. Oh, we'll find $15 billion in savings over a handful of years. That never happened, right? So there are no savings this year in the budget. All you see is spending going up by billions of dollars every single year.
Yeah, they just keep kicking the can down the road. I mean, a promise to cut spending isn't a cut to any spending. Are there any of these initiatives? I guess I'll try to start on the other side of the coin, though. Anything you see that it's a positive? Is there something good they've done? I mean, there's got to be something in there.
Oh, I didn't know this was going to be a gotcha interview, Cory. Toughest question of the day.
Well, there's hundreds of pages. I mean, there's got to be something, two-ply tissue in the parliamentary washroom or something.
Yeah, look, there is like a couple things here, right? So, you remember the luxury tax that the Trudeau government brought in, which is really just a tax on blue-collar workers who build boats and airplanes. So it looks like the government is going to be cutting that. So that's some good news. There's some changes on how businesses can calculate their expensing, right? So that's some decent news there. It looks like the government is also being a little squishy around the production cap on oil and gas, right? It looks like the government might back off on that. So I guess you can call that good news. I mean, that should be scrapped immediately. But, there's almost an ultimatum on that one, right? Because Carney is doubling down on the industrial carbon tax, on the hidden carbon tax on Canadian business, right? And look, that's going to be a huge blow to Canada's competitiveness. And what it does is that it pushes Canadian entrepreneurs to cut production here and set up shop south of the border.
So, I mean, let's get on then to the low-hanging fruit, the reality. Where are they blowing money that they really shouldn't be?
Where aren't they blowing money? I mean, look, you got the federal government spending $100,000 on a study about a grocery cart. Cory, you remember Trailer Park Boys, hey, with Bubbles? One of my favorite shows. Like, just give Bubbles a couple packs of pepperoni sticks, and there you go. You got your study about a grocery cart. No need to spend six figures. Or the government spending $20,000 on a study about gender politics of Peruvian rock music. Like, huh? Or the government spending $8,000 studying the gender identities in online Harry Potter fan communities. I mean, what a waste of money, right? We all know J.K. Rowling's stance on gender is pretty firm. And we also know that grown-up Harry Potter nerds never get laid. So just a complete waste of money. But look, the biggest thing that the government has to do is that the government should have been firing thousands of bureaucrats yesterday.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember, again, just showing my gray hair and so on. But, the time of the austerity, the real austerity of the 1990s, one of the first things that Premier Klein did was actually cut the salaries of MLAs, at least as an example. 5% each. Here we go. We're starting with ourselves. We're taking a bit of a haircut, and now we're going to apply it all the way down the civil service. I mean, that's the only way I think morally you can pull that off. They are really just high-paid civil servants, but I imagine there's no mumbling of reducing compensation for any of our members of parliament.
No, when they say we're all in this together, they mean it. They're not talking about me and you, Cory. They're talking about the gang of 300 of them up there on Parliament Hill. And hey, I'll just shamelessly plug my column that I wrote for you guys at the Western Standard. It was published this week, right? Yeah. And it kind of goes through this historical point that, all the politicians in the modern era, all of them who were successful in reining in the deficit, they all did one thing first, showed leadership by cutting their own pay, right? You have Harper. Following the 08-09 crisis, he froze MP pay for a couple of years. They reformed the pensions to make them a little bit more affordable for taxpayers. What about the 90s, right? You saw the 90s federally, where in the early 90s, there was pay cuts for ministers and the prime minister until they balanced the budget. Or, you mentioned Klein, the 5% pay cut for politicians. There's also a 5% pay cut for bureaucrats. But this story goes on and on and on. Like, if you want to make the necessary cuts to the bureaucracy, politicians got to show leadership themselves and cut their own pay. And, Cory, we are always criticizing the government, but I'll say I haven't heard even a single member of parliament from an opposition party forcefully push for members of parliament to take a pay cut. I haven't heard it.
So you already took a shot at those poor adult Harry Potter fans and their lack of sexual gratification, but there's other nerds out there, and those are economists and people who look at that broader picture. Maybe we should dig a little deeper into the nerdy end of this, though. The bigger part, how does this affect our economy? When we're looking at inflation, when we're looking at devaluation of currency, massive government spending has longer-term consequences than just what we see on our tax bill.
Oh, yeah, there's three ways. Okay, Cory, hold me accountable to it. Three ways. So number one, you get worse and worse services, even though the federal government takes more and more money, right? Like you're looking at interest charges making up about $56 billion this year. By 2029, interest charges on the debt are going to blow a $76 billion hole in the budget. Right. So even though the government is taking more money from Canadians, less and less dollars can then be allocated towards other services. And look no further of a prime example of this to Saskatchewan in the 1990s, where you had an NDP government there close dozens of hospitals across that prairie province. But number two, it's also a hit to our economy. Right? Ask business investors. They see these massive deficits and they worry about tax increases tomorrow. Right. So that discourages the businesses from setting up shop here in Canada. So the third one, too, is just inflation. And we really saw that during the pandemic as the Bank of Canada printed up hundreds of billions of dollars out of thin air, financing Ottawa's deficits, right, leading to a 40-year high inflation. So those are the three ways that this massive borrowing problem impacts us. Worse services as debt interest charges eat up more of the budget. A worse economy as investors don't want to invest in Canada because of potential future tax hikes. And third, the worst tax of them all, the inflation tax.
Well, I thought McCartney was supposed to be a genius when it came to, macroeconomics and some of those things. He wants to make Canada the destination for self-sustained, industry and investment. But I mean, anybody, I think, in their first year of economics should know, well, to do that, you've got to cut the regulation. You've got to cut the taxes. You got to create the business environment to draw these industries in. And he's doing the very opposite.
Well, there's only one thing I'll quibble with you there, Cory, is I think you're giving the taxpayer-funded universities too much credit. I think that's a little quibble. But hey, look, we're hearing the government talk about investment. I mean, it's just more spending. It's more debt. And look, like, this is a continuation of the Trudeau era. It is. Like, remember, it was under Trudeau where they called investments, which was really just corporate welfare, the billions and billions of dollars to multinational corporations so they can build battery plants, right? Like, folks, we just saw this failed experiment play out in real time over the last 10 years where the government tried to borrow its way to prosperity. And how did that work? Massive inflation and a stagnating Canadian economy, right? We just saw this social experiment fail over the last 10 years. So what do you think is going to happen over the next 10 years if the government continues this Trudeau-era debt-fueled spending spree?
Well, it's unfortunate. It's pretty bleak, but what do you think the chances are that there will be any amendments or changes? I mean, the budget hasn't passed yet. Do you think there's a chance some of this could be fixed up a little bit?
Well, Cory, I don't know. I don't know this year. I really don't know. But, if there is a glimmer of hope, it takes me back to like 1994, because everyone remembers when Martin and Chrétien, they ended up balancing the budget in 3 years. But that started in the 1995 budget, right? The 1994 budget was kind of more of the same that you saw from the previous governments over the last couple decades. So there is hope, but it's really going to take pressure both from Canadians to be like, yo, this is enough. We can't just keep borrowing like this forever. But it's also going to take backbone from the opposition parties, right? And, to give them some credit, the Conservatives have been pretty good calling for some spending cuts, calling for a lower deficit. But they're going to have to go harder. They're going to have to make the case that the government is wrong and that what we need at this time are legitimate and serious spending cuts.
Yeah, well, and the government theoretically could fall on this budget, but it looks like they're kind of getting the pieces in place, getting a floor crosser. We know Elizabeth May, for a bottle of gin, she'll vote however she, is told. They'll probably get it over the line. But do you think there's a chance maybe enough members of parliament would make a stand? I mean, I don't see it. I suspect some of the Conservatives will get the flu that day if it looked that way, because they're not ready for an election either. But maybe there'd be something to put some pressure on.
Well, with the floor crossing last night, the government only needs 2 votes now? Is that right? And there are some rumors swirling. I mean, Ottawa's national pastime is rumors about the next possible election. So I don't really, I take it with a grain of salt, right? But I mean, at this point in time, I think the way the math works out is that the government only needs either 2 votes, 2 extra floor crossers, or 2 people to not vote, right? So, I mean, I don't want to place any bets, but it's sure looking like all they need is 2 things to happen and they'll get the budget passed.
Yeah, well, we still always hope for the best. I mean, I appreciate what you guys do, though. You break it down in lay terms. So as I said, that we need the pressure to come up from citizens to go to their politicians to change those things within there. And you guys at the Taxpayers Federation do an excellent job of that with your column and other stuff. But I've been pumping your tires enough. But still, before I let you go, where could people find all that good stuff and how can they support you?
Well, hey, the best way to find our stuff and to support us is at taxpayer.com. You can also just follow us on every social media. Just type in Canadian Taxpayers Federation. You can follow me directly on X. I'm at Franco_nomics, but the best place to follow us is at taxpayer.com.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for coming on, Franco. I know you got a whole whack to do during budget week, so looking forward to seeing more of your work coming out there and talking to you again on the show soon.
Yeah, that'd be great, Cory. Thanks so much for having me on, man.
Great. Thank you, Franco. All right, guys. Yeah, just one more time. That's Franco Terzano. You can get all the good stuff at taxpayer.com. Because, I mean, I know a lot of it can make the eyes glaze over. I mean, that's what these guys got to do. They put those budget documents out, and they're huge, they're thick, they're boring. These guys will distill it down so you can see and have that apply to you. I'm going to paraphrase and break it terribly, something along the lines, but like people can understand. That's why, the $16 orange juice, drove everybody crazy years ago, yet they kind of shrug off $1 billion because billions don't register in the average citizen's mind. It's not in there. We don't deal in terms like that. And we need to have it, as I said, distilled, broken down, and in ways that just make more sense to us. And that's what those guys do. That's what I like to think I do to a little bit of a degree. And what we need more of being done by our elected officials, though. They're supposed to know better. They're supposed to do better. And we're not seeing much of that. That's why I sound a little defeatist sometimes when I go on about independence-minded things. Let's see what some of the comments there. Kenzie Cracking saying, hey, don't have your show on during the same time as question period. Thanks. Well, I don't think they should have question period on at the same time as my show. How about that? But, I'm on every Wednesday at this exact same time all year round. Those clowns in Parliament only sit for so many days a year. I know it's frustrating, so there's a little bit of overlap. But keep in mind, question period is mostly just an exchange of insults. They rarely ever actually answer anything. And if any member knocks one truly out of the park, which I enjoy watching as much as the next person, that the YouTube clips will be up there to be seen. But here you get it live, guys. You get the interaction. You send me the question, and often, though not always, I'll give an answer on it. This is my perspective saying supposedly there'll be 2 more crossing over. There should be by-elections, not crossover into that party status. Yeah, so, that's what Franco was saying as well. There's endless speculation, political intrigue, things that go on, floor crossings back and forth. We won't be able to force by-elections without changing the entire system. And as I said before, you got to remember, you're really going to give a heck of a lot of power to those leaders, and they already have way too much if you take away that ability to cross the floor. I don't like what they're doing. I'm not saying it. I'm not defending the floor crossers. I'm defending the ability for there to be floor crossers. We're not going to get an election. I'll never say 100%, not in Canada's system and the way things go. But the odds of an election coming over this budget are very, very slim. The NDP don't even have a leader yet. They're broke. In fact, they're grossly in debt. This is a huge problem for them. They don't want to go into an election right now. Elizabeth May is clinging to the last vestiges of her best job she'll ever have her whole life. She will go whatever way it is to keep that job hanging in there as long as possible. And the Conservatives are always looking at the numbers. If you want to know one of the number one things political parties spend money on, having worked within them, polling. They're always polling. They're constantly polling. And if they don't see a good surge, something that's going to really pull them over the finish line, they're not going to trigger an election. And things aren't looking fantastic for the Conservatives right now. So as I said, even if they didn't get the floor crossers to come over to make this happen, I forget what they call it, often the parliamentary flu, but a few Conservative members will suddenly take sick on the day of the budget vote, and the budget will pass. So none of them will vote for the budget, but enough of them will be there that the budget will manage to pass. I stand to be proven wrong on that within a couple of weeks, but I don't think we should be dusting off the old election signs federally quite yet. Though who knows? It's a crazy, crazy world. Jordan saying, I don't consider Parliament to be an effective representation for me. It's rigged, and Alberta will never get a fair deal within the Confederation. Well, I kind of agree with that. That's where I talk about the independence referendums and things that would be the catalyst to either tearing down and rebuilding the entire Canadian system, or at least tearing down and rebuilding a good chunk of it over here, because I don't know if we can save the entire thing. CB Fixes All says, how much did he pay the traitor to cross the floor to the dark side? Well, I doubt there was any direct payment, but MPs love being in government, because when you're in government, it's not direct payment, but what you will get is parliamentary secretary positions, if not a cabinet position, right? There will be things offered, and that's a good chunk of extra change and extra allowances and extra staff. You also get onto a whole schwack of committees. Not nearly enough people talk about that, but you get onto all those committees, you get paid for all of those, even if they don't sit a heck of a lot. Nice extra money into the pocket. And of course, the people just seem to prefer on the ground to have a government member in office, depending on the government. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting. Getting onto the budget things, getting onto the economics, and people who just don't pay enough attention to it. Hayek, one of my favorite economists. I was talking about dorks. I'm a dork. I won't deny it. One of my favorite quotes from him was, if socialists understood economics, they wouldn't be socialists. It really is. You've got to have a mental disconnect to embrace socialism. And people just blank that out and somehow keep supporting a system that is a proven failure over and over and over and over again. And yes, socialism is just communism light, guys. It's just a matter of degree. And when we see what happened in New York, the financial hub of the Western world, massive city, has elected a socialist lunatic. He wants to nationalize grocery stores. He wants to nationalize rentals. It's going to make things so brutally bad there. And of course, he's going to do it by taxing the rich. No, the rich will leave. They already are. They're fleeing. As I was saying, there is no Iron Curtain. You can't do it like East and West Berlin. So the capital, the skilled, the ambitious, and this already been happening. You look at the population balances in the United States, the interstate movement of people. And Texas is growing. Tennessee is growing. Arizona's growing. Nevada's growing. You know what's shrinking? New York and California. Florida's growing. Because the people with the money, the brains, the ambition, and realizing the ugliness of socialism, whether it's under Newsom or this nutcase in New York, are saying, I'm getting the hell out of there. But you see, this leads to a self-perpetuating problem, because what do you leave behind? The welfare bums, the entitled, the unproductive. Then your budget gets worse. Then the socialists in charge try to drain more from the productive. Then they drive the productive out more. Guess what? We got into that cycle that collapses socialism every time. And New York, of all cities, such a massive city, is going to run down that experiment. I say, well, fine. Go for it. I used the analogy in the newsroom. I was talking to Leah. They were saying, look at it like the old school way of trying to get a kid off of cigarettes if you caught them smoking. Make them smoke 100 of them and get them real sick and green and everything and understand how bad it is for you. And then perhaps they'll wisen up and not take it up. Well, let's let them have their taste of socialism. Go ahead, drink up, consume it, enjoy it. Have the fruits of that. Enjoy those bread lines. Because you think that government control of stores hasn't already been tried, you morons? Enjoy the block housing in the ghettos. Because you think government control of housing hasn't been tried, you guys? And think of all the waiting lists to get onto everything, to get anything. Because socialized commodities are rationed commodities. We're seeing that in Canada when we've given a socialized monopoly to healthcare. It's great. Nobody ever has to pay out of pocket for healthcare. The problem is you're prone to dying before you can actually get in to access it, because we are running out of it. But it's a good point of principle, isn't it? Well, this is what gets applied everywhere. Plus, government can't do anything well, ever. Dave brought that up in the news update. With that was the big 2 billion trees. Should have been a very simple program, not one that the government should have needed to get into in the first place. But if the government was going to take something on, a nice green thing, that's why for our simplistic prime minister of Trudeau, he came up with this one. They were going to plant 2 billion trees, him and Climate Barbie, and they put that out there. 6 years later, and 50 full-time employees, blowing $268 million. How much do those 50 employees take each anyway? But they didn't even come close to planting 2 billion trees. How hard is it? There's an area that has no trees. Take a tree, dig a little hole, stuff the tree in the hole. Holy cow, you did it. And the government couldn't do it. This was too complicated for them. This was too difficult a program for them to manage efficiently to even plant bloody trees across the country. Now think of the things people are asking government to do. Do you really want government to take over providing lunches to kids in schools? Because that's where the federal government's jumped into now. I think one of the best examples you see of that is somebody saying, if government took over cooking or something like that, shows that if government's made breakfast, here's a frying pan with an egg cracked over on the side on the stove and some toast burning on an element somewhere else. Guys, the government can't do anything well, and it won't, but it'll do it in a costly way, in an intrusive way. Likewise, government daycare, same thing. What's happening now with the daycare? The government got into daycare. Oh, we all got free daycare. It's going to have 100% return on everything because all the women will go out working and everybody pay taxes. We'll all be happy little families. Oh, there's no spaces? Yeah. Socialized services our ration services. We don't have enough of them. People have to have an expense. They have to pay out of pocket. And I hate to point this out, but abuse of socialized systems is rampant. It always is. And not every person who would take advantage of a socialized daycare system is a hardworking single parent who just wants to get out there and contribute. A lot of them, I'm going to say it, it's true. I lived in Forest Lawn for some years. I saw this. There's some lazy people out there. There's some entitled people out there. And the more you give them, the more they're going to pull. It's not to say we shouldn't have any social services, but when you throw them out blindly, people will take advantage of them and there will be waste. So when you try these blanket programs, you just overwhelm the system. And what does that do for the people? Well, then they have to pay out of pocket to try and get better services outside of that. So then the people who really are working, paying for daycare, going to a private daycare outside of the socialized daycare system, end up paying a fortune to get their kids into that. Or they'll stop working. They'll say, screw it, I'm going to be a stay-at-home parent. Well, you've just done the opposite of what this system is supposed to do. So this government is going to spend us all into prosperity. They're going to take care of everything. They're going to put our great-great-grandchildren into debt because these are investments. The government doesn't invest in anything, it spends, not investments. And they're trying some voodoo economics. Oh, this is different. This is a capital investment over here. And that, oh, come on, spare me. I can't stand that in provincial projects, budgets too. Well, that was different. That was operating expenses and this is capital. Okay, I kind of understand how they're different areas, but it's still all spending. Do you think we could pick up that capital project and spend it? Or sell it? Who's going to buy an overpass? What are you going to do with it? You know, it's still government spending and we only have so many dollars. So where do we go with this? But we are on a bad track. CB Fixall says the forestry companies do the replanting every year and they don't get a cushy government paycheck. That's right. Private woodlots maintained by people actually do very, very well. We should be logging the crap out of the West. You want to deal with the pine beetles? You want to deal with drought? You want to deal with standing dead? You want to deal with, the local economy? Log like hell. Guess what? They grow back, especially if we plant them. And you know what happens if we don't? They burn. We've seen that. We've seen that in spades. Let the private market do what it will. Export that wood. There's developing countries who want it like crazy. Export, of course, all of our raw resources, but we won't because we're this green country, right? The emissions cap. Let's get back to that beauty. So Carney said he's going to get rid of it. There's the bone he tossed to Danielle. I saw Rob Anderson, one of her chief of staff, talking on X about it. No, not exactly. So they're rejecting that already. It's a promise to get rid of it. If Alberta does this, then it's nothing. It's nothing. You aren't getting rid of it. You put conditions on it. If you wanted to get rid of it, you just get rid of it. It's not that hard. And that chills investment because people aren't going to put money in when there's going to be a government-imposed cap on them making money later. It's impossible. No investor in their right mind will invest in Alberta's energy projects as long as Carney's got a gun to the head with the emissions cap. This should be enough to go to a referendum alone because we're paying the bloody bills and they're making it harder and harder for us to do it. We don't get a thank you. We just get squeezed harder and our own industries get kicked in the proverbial knackers and stopped from expanding. It's brutal. And then here we go. I'll just close off with other stuff that gets me wound up. But let's look at, speaking of the lunatic in New York, and boy, the Jews are in for a good ride over there, aren't they? But are we much better off over here? The Toronto police force, the most cowardly force in Canada, and they really have been for a couple of years. These are the ones that brought donuts and coffee, literally, not even figuratively. I know lefties love to abuse the word literally. No, I mean literally in that officer came with donuts and coffee and gave them to Hamas supporters in Toronto who were terrorizing a Jewish community. But what do you expect? This is a news release from the Toronto Police Force yesterday. Suspected hate-motivated mischief to religious property investigation at Bayview Avenue and Fifeshire Road area. Okay, so they're asking for help with this suspected hate-motivated mischief. What it was a synagogue, had swastikas painted on it, and it was vandalized and abused. In Canada, they've been putting bullets through synagogues for a couple of years already. But they don't say synagogue. They say religious property investigation. Who the hell says religious property? Would you say that about a church? Would you say that about a mosque? Would you say that about a Sikh temple? No. But when it's a synagogue, those cowardly creeps on the Toronto Police Force say, a religious property. You scumbags. Say it like it is, because a particular group is getting targeted. And how do you prevent that if you won't even admit who the group is that's being targeted? You say it's hate motivated? Well, fine. Motivated by who and why? How do you know what it's going to be? It's a religious property. That could be anything. And in particular, that one thing you just won't mention. No Jews, no news. Getting sick of that crap, guys. Free the West. All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning in today. Be sure to watch The Pipeline tonight to be coming on another panel, breaking down more issues. Subscribe to all of our channels. Get out there, share this stuff. Keep the Western Standard flying out there and independent so we can report this to you. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, guys. We will see you all again next week. Break down what's happened by then.